सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः आपदामपहर्तारं दातारं सर्वसम्पदां लोकाभिरामं श्रीरामं भूयो भूयो नमाम्यहं समस्तजनकल्याणे निरतं करुणामयं नमामि चिन्मयं देवं सद्गुरुं ब्रह्मविद्वरम्। Hari Om. So we are continuing our steps of Navada Bhakti. In our previous session, we had looked at 3 of them. The first one was Satsang, second one Rati, and the third one was Seva, Guru Seva. And that too without any abhiman or without any pride. Right. One thing I wanted to add about this topic of Guru. Remember, it is not a blind faith that somebody puts in the Guru, that someone has in the Guru. In fact, the Guru makes every effort, every attempt to present that truth in the most logical, methodological way possible. And in fact, the Guru goes on inviting the Shishya to question, to ask questions along the way, to make sure that whatever is being said, the Shishya is actually internalizing it, is actually turning it against their way of thinking. Gurudev used to always say, the longer the beard, the more you should doubt. So I don't have a beard, so nobody should be doubting. But the idea, what he was trying to get across was that nobody should sit with a blind faith in the Guru, or in this teaching for that matter. The reason why Vedanta is so appealing and Vedanta speaks to our heart is because Vedanta, or our Vedas for that matter, their interest is not to make us dependent on Vedas. Moksha is not, you are independent of everything else and now you are dependent on Vedas. Moksha is not, you are independent from everything else and now you are dependent on your Guru. That can't be the moksha that we're looking for. We already decided the kind of happiness, the kind of peace that we're striving for, looking for. It is independent, right? Everything in front of us, everything experienced, all of that can fade away. But we don't want our joy to ever fade away, right? Which means we don't want our joys to be dependent on that which is external, correct? So if we say, my moksha is to be independent from everything, but to remain dependent on the Guru, then have we not just said, I want happiness which is dependent? So the Guru is the one, and Shastras are the one that in fact encourage us to go on thinking, questioning everything that's being said. Not to make us dependent on the Shastra or Guru, but to make us completely independent. In fact, the Guru is the one who will say, if you've understood what is to be understood, if you've understood the truth, In fact, you have no need for Shastra or Guru. And it's not just the Guru that says that. Even our Shastras declare that. That the one who has understood the purpose that Shastras is trying to convey, once the purpose is served, you no longer need to carry that Shastra around with you. And I love this about our Shastras. That in fact, from all angles, we are being told how to be independently happy. Okay, so the third one we covered, doing Guru Seva without any pride. Now the fourth one is in that Doha. So if you don't know, these big chunks that are there, these chunks are called chaupais. And then every now and then you'll see like just a standalone couplet. That's called a Doha, okay? So in this Doha 35, in the second line, the fourth step is given. It says, Chauthi bhagati mama guna gana karai kapata taji gan. The fourth bhakti is to do Bhagwan's gunagan. Gunagan means to sing the praises of Bhagwan. Kapata taji, having let go of kapat. And so kapat literally means like deceit. So sing Bhagwan's praises without any deceit. But to put it in our, in a practical sense. When do you know that deceit is happening? When do you feel that when do you ever feel that you have been deceived? We feel this way when there's inconsistency, right? When there's inconsistency in what you may have been told and what was then done. And so that inconsistency is the seed for this kapat. To put this in in our everyday language, what does it mean to sing the praises of God without any deceit? All this is saying is practice what you preach. Practice what you preach. This is what this fourth one really means. It is very, very difficult to stand by something, to stand by an ideal that we ourselves have not practiced, that we ourselves are not implementing. It becomes very hard, difficult to stand by such an ideal. How many of you know the benefits of exercising? Like everybody, right? We all know the benefits of exercising. How many of you know some exercises? I'm not asking if you do them, but if you know them. So all of you know them, right? If I had to ask you, can you write down on a piece of paper, write down the benefits of exercising and also write down some exercises? Would you be able to do it? Yeah, okay. If you were to look for a personal trainer, let's say, okay? Would you go to a personal trainer who can write infinite blogs on how to exercise, what to eat, what are the benefits of exercise, but they're sitting on their couch eating potato chips all day long? Or would you like to go to a trainer who knows what they're talking about, but is also practicing what they talk about? Naturally, I hope you all would go to the second one, right? This reminds me, on YouTube, there's so many videos of like to exercise. You can do this to exercise, do that to exercise. And I went through a phase where I would watch some of these videos trying to get motivation to, yes, I should exercise. And you watch like 4 or 5 of them, and then you yourself feel like, yeah, I exercised, wonderful. But you just watched a video. So here, the point I'm trying to make is, it's very easy to stand by something. It's easy to confidently stand by something that you yourself have put into practice. But it's very difficult to stand by something that you only have heard about, or you haven't necessarily churned it for yourself. You haven't necessarily worked it against your own personality, seen how it fits in your life. You haven't seen that yet. Whenever our intellect and our mind, intellect which makes decisions, and the mind which then should follow that intellect, that intellect. Whenever there's a discrepancy between the two, understand there will be kapat in our actions. There will be deceit in the way that we act. There will be inconsistency in the way that we act. How many of you know it's not good to look at a screen before you sleep? How many of you still look at a screen before you sleep? This is called kapat. This is called deceit. Notice the kapat we are talking about here, this deceit, is not deceit out in the world. Like, oh, that person deceived me, or oh, that person, cheated me. It's not an external deceit. The deceit Bhagavan is talking about here is that internal one. When there's an immense discrepancy between what we need to do and what we want to do, between the mind and the intellect. Think about this. If you see deceit outside, and you can point out, oh, that person is living an inconsistent life. What difference does that make to you living in a consistent life? Why I'm pointing this out is Bhagavan is trying to make us think of the deceit within, not without. In fact, if we realize the only kapat, or the only inconsistency we have full control over is our own, that'll make life a lot easier. Because we like to look outside and point out other people's inconsistencies, right? And the more we do that, what happens is the less we pay attention to our own inconsistencies. And all Bhagavan is saying is if you're focused on the outside, if you're focused on what's going wrong outside, it's going to make no difference for you in terms of aligning your mind and intellect, in terms of abiding in the truth, in the teachings that Bhagavan is trying to explain. So let's bring this to the topic then, bhakti then. Once we've been alerted to a greater purpose in life, we should ask ourselves, what are we doing to implement or integrate that greater purpose in our life? And so long as we are working to integrate that higher purpose, we are not living a life of deceit. This doesn't mean that only when my mind starts listening to my intellect, then only can I start living this teaching. Because that day when will that day come? Right. The idea here is just start. The very fact that you've decided, I am going to start working on this mind. I am going to start trying to live a life of consistency, where I make a decision and my mind follows. I'm going to try it. I'm going to try to bring in the teachings of Vedanta in my everyday life. Right. I'm going to try it. Just that much is enough to say you are no longer living a life of kapat, of deceit. Because there's many professional satsang goers who are seasoned. They know exactly what to do when they sit. They know when to nod and they know when to do everything. But even amongst those people, they may be able to listen to a satsang, but the moment they walk out, there's complete discrepancy. What was taught in the class, what was absorbed in the class, it somehow spills out, and they no longer live a life that's led by that teaching. There's great inconsistency there. So long as we are making an effort to bring in the teaching, so long as we are making an effort to allow the teachings, Swamiji used to tell us this, allow the teachings to interfere in our life. Literally interfere, he would use that word. If we're allowing the teachings to interfere in our life, then we are not living a life of kapat, of deceit. Why that word interfere? Because in the beginning, trying to remember, oh yeah, Bhagavan is expressing in everyone. It is going to feel like an interference to your normal way of thinking. It's going to feel like, why should I bring this up? I really don't like that person. Right. It's going to feel like a solid interference. But the idea is, if we go on practicing, the practice is consistent, slowly the teachings will become more and more evident. That truth will become more and more evident, to the point where you no longer have to allow the teachings to interfere. They just become a part of your life. This is like the culmination of not living a life of kapat. You start with practice, and that practice then culminates in a point where you no longer even have to try to bring in the teachings. They just come. So we have to start doing this in a, we take baby steps first. If the teaching is, Bhagwan is expressing in everything as everything, how should I start this off? At least in places where it's evident, where it's easy for us to recognize. Like when you see friendship, when you see love, when you see compassion, when you see you are able to push through a difficulty. When you see these things in your life, recognize, oh, this is that expression of Bhagwan. Slowly do this, meaning in places where it's obvious. Then bring in the next phase, where it's not so obvious anymore. When there's anger, when there's jealousy, when these emotions erupt. Bring in other teachings. Suppose you're angry at someone, right? You really want to yell at them. And you bring in the teaching Bhagwan is expressing in that person. Again, it's an interference, but allow it to turn in your mind. See what happens when you start to recognize, wait, the truth is that Bhagwan is in that person. And now start to see, how should I formulate my thinking in line with that truth? And we have to practice it. It's not a night thing that from tomorrow you'll look at your worst enemy and be like, I see Bhagwan in you, Hari Om, wonderful. Like, it's not going to happen that quickly. But again, it's that turning process, right? And the fact that you're trying means you're not living this life of deceit. This is the most beautiful part of it. How many of you have ever stubbed your toe on something and then gotten mad at the table or the door that you stubbed your toe on? Yeah. Think, we unleash this anger, this terrible anger. If I realize, bring in another teaching. Life is nothing but going through ups and downs. And so stubbing your toe is a very basic, gross example. But think, life is nothing but ups and downs. This life perceived through my senses, that's all it is. And if I recognize that this is a fact, that life is going to present itself as ups and downs, then is it really justified for me to lash out on something which is just going according to its nature? If life presents you with sorrow at one moment, and then life presents you with happiness the next moment, and then again with sorrow, is it worth getting upset because sorrow came? Don't we know that your life that you're living is nothing but packets of joy and sorrow coming to you? It's like getting mad at fire for being hot. Would you get mad at fire for being hot? But we do. We burn ourselves and we're like, why did you burn me? But you can't blame fire. Fire is hot. My point is, we may bring the teachings into our life and we may fail many times to live up to those teachings. But the fact that we're trying to our full potential, the fact that we're trying means we are living by this fourth step of bhakti. That we are trying to uphold Bhagwan's teachings without any deceit. And the thing is, sometimes we do need to fall a few times. Sometimes we do need to, go through those episodes where we fail. We fail to live up to those teachings. But without getting discouraged, we just try again. Sometimes it's very easy to look for validation, whether we are doing we're living these teachings or not. It's very easy to look for validation outside, in the world outside. And I think this is where kapat can start sneaking in, that deceit can start sneaking in. Because think about it. You may have started to do, let's say, your japa, right? And you're in your house and you're doing your japa. And suppose your mom walks by and she sees you doing your japa. And she's like, oh, very good, beta. You did your japa, so nice. And then you just stop because you're like, wow, my mom said that I'm doing my japa and she's so happy, great. And you stop. That validation doesn't really mean anything as far as what your intention is. Your intention was to do this japa to abide in a teaching that you had heard in satsang, correct? And your intention was to do it to completion. To do that japa to a point where your mind was calm, your mind was quiet. Now what happens is when someone praises us or if someone insults us while we're doing these things, all of a sudden they become our benchmarks for whether or not we're proceeding properly or not. We are the only ones, really speaking, in your sadhana. You are the only one you have to answer to because you are the only one who knows with what intention you are doing your sadhana. And I will say even to the extent that whoever you consider your guru is only going to know the actions you present in front of them. Correct? And so what you do when they're not looking, that's on you. Right? We are the only ones we have to answer to when we are doing this sadhana. And the quicker we can realize that, the quicker we stop looking for validation outside, the smaller we are making that avenue for kapat to enter into our sadhana, for this deceit, this inconsistency to express. Okay, so we covered the fourth one. Fourth one is what? Practice what you preach. Practice what you preach. Okay. Now, as I said this morning, we are going to do some thinking, some inquiry. And the inquiry starts with the fifth one. So I want to read this whole portion. We'll sing the whole chunk tomorrow when we have more time, but I'll just read the first line. Oh, I have to turn the page. Okay. So it says, Mantra japa mama dridha vishvasa panchama bhajana so veda prakasa. We're now entering into the fifth step. The fifth step says, with full faith in Bhagavan, in reality, do mantra, meaning chant mantras, and do japa. With full faith in Bhagavan, meaning do your sadhanas with faith that there is such a reality that I'm trying to reach. Imagine if I were to come here, right? I was told, okay, there's a camp in San Jose, you're going to go there and you're going to, be here with the chicks. And there's an ashram in San Jose that you'll be going to. And so imagine if I left my house and I had a doubt. I don't think there is any such San Jose ashram. And I left my house like this. How far would I get? I would drive not even half a mile and I'd wonder, should I still proceed? Because I don't know if there's any such San Jose ashram. Because I had faith, let's say the first time I came here, because I had faith that there is such a San Jose ashram, I was able to make it here. Right. In the same way, if you have faith that there is such a reality, there is a reality which is not different from my own self. There is a reality expressing as Bhagavan, which is in fact my own nature. There is such a, in other words, Brahman. We have to start there, that there is such a thing. And once that starts, then only does my japa, then only does all this mantra chanting, then only does all this meditation have any meaning. Otherwise, the moment you put a mala in your hand and you have no idea or you have no faith in the goal that this japa is supposed to fulfill, how many malas will you be able to do? You won't even be able to turn one bead because you'll wonder, I don't know why I'm doing this. And forget the physical practice. Why should I be nice to my enemies? You'll doubt, right? I don't even know if there's Bhagwan. Someone just said that, but I don't have faith in that, right? Even these qualities of unfolding our personality, those qualities will be very hard to express if we don't have faith in the goal. So this is very key that Bhagwan says, mantra japa mama dridha vishwasa. Have faith in me and then do your sadhanas. Have faith in the goal and then do your sadhanas. They will find meaning when there's shraddha, when there's faith. So this is the fifth bhakti, and there's one more part to this. Bhajanaso Veda Prakasa. And do that which is mentioned in the Vedas. Live a life which is guided by the Vedas. And actually, this is the thing that contextualizes the previous part. Have faith in Bhagwan and then do your sadhanas. No, first, actually, we have to preface it with live a life guided by Vedas. If you have to live a life guided by Vedas, you have to know what Vedas are saying, right? Otherwise, it's very hard to live a life guided by Vedas. So we are going to conduct a little inquiry, a two-part inquiry into what are Vedas saying. What are our Vedas trying to tell us? And so I'll start off with a little story. And Gurudev used to tell this story all the time. There was once a very, very wealthy businessman, very wealthy. And he naturally would have to, travel for business. And one day he left, and of course he wanted to go from Rajasthan to Madras. That's what he was trying to do. And so he got up and he was ready to go catch his train. And when he got to the train station, there was a con man just waiting for some such person, some businessman, some wealthy person who has, obviously if he's going to do business, you need money to do business. So this con man thought, okay, if he's going to do business, he must have some money on him. So this con man saw this businessman and he thought, perfect, I'll just follow him into his cabin and strike some conversation. I'll do some pickpocketing and then be off. So the con man got dressed up, wore his best suit, did his hair, I guess, and got ready so that he could also look the part, that he could also look like, oh, I belong in this first class, cabin. And so he followed the businessman into the cabin. And the businessman, saw that there's a person sitting in front of him. And so the businessman just casually asked him, what do you do? And the businessman himself was in the textile business. And so he asked the man in front of him, that con man, he said, what do you do for a living? And the con man was like, oh, I'm in the textile business. And so this businessman was like, okay, cool, I have someone to talk to. So he started asking questions very specific to this textile business. And the con man gave answers, but it was very clear to the businessman that this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. This guy is clearly lying. And so this businessman understood. And so just before it was time to go to sleep, the businessman said, I'm just going to run to the bathroom. I'll get ready and I'll come back. And so he does that. And then the con man is like, okay, yeah, me too. I'm just going to, probably go to sleep. So he goes off, comes back. And by the time he comes back, the businessman is fast asleep. And the con man feels, okay, perfect. Now that he's asleep, I'm going to scour this entire cabin and find the money. And so he looks and he looks and he searches every square inch of the cabin and he can't find anything. He looks everywhere and he can't find anything. And so the next morning, the businessman wakes up and he goes to the bathroom, comes back. The con man goes to the bathroom, comes back. And when he comes back, he sees this businessman like sitting all, with one leg up, and he's counting his money. And the con man is like, but I looked everywhere. How did I not find this giant stack of money? And so the same thing happens that night. The businessman goes to sleep, and the con man feels, okay, this time I'm going to find the money. At least I have confirmation that there is some money. And the same thing happens. He searches everywhere, and he cannot find the money. And the next morning, the businessman has his one leg up, and he's counting his money. And so eventually they get to Madras. And this con man is so exhausted. He's so tired. He's so desperate. He feels, some way or the other, I need to find out where this man was keeping his money. And so when the businessman walks out, the businessman also knew that this con man, he's a joker. So the businessman walks out and he just waits outside of the train. He says, let this con man come out. I'll talk to him when he comes out. And the con man comes out and he is so desperate. He says, look, I am a con man and I was trying to steal your money. Just tell me, where did you keep the money? And so the businessman looks at him and he says, my grandfather once told me that anytime you're traveling and there's someone with you in your cabin, always keep your money under their pillow. And the beauty of this story is that when it comes to sukham, when it comes to happiness, we also scour every inch of this universe, every inch of this creation, looking for happiness. But we never think, let me look within. Let me look to the subject for that happiness. That happiness which is ever actually there, which is ever present, which is ever expressing. Because our vision is turned outward, because our thinking is so extroverted, we never think to look within. Now, if we know this, that sukham is within, sukham is my own nature, it is me, it is myself. This knowledge you've already heard. Now, we already said it so many times in the morning class. We just talked about it right now. And somehow, we all agree, right? Do you all feel right now, confidently, raise your hand if you are Brahman. Exactly. If we want that knowledge to be our vision, of life, then some inquiry has to start taking place. If that's what we want to get to, if we want to get to that point, we need to find out, well, where am I right now? Right. You know, like on a map, right? If you go to a museum and you need to find the exit, what's the first thing you do if you're lost? You go to the map and you have to first find the dot. You are here. Then when you know where you are, you can find the exit. So in the same way, if I want to come to know that truth as my own self, I have to first find out, okay, well, where am I right now? Let me find out, what do I know right now? And then I'll come to that understanding. It's kind of like an investigation, like a crime scene investigation. How many of you watch like CSI Miami and all that stuff? So it's kind of like that. Imagine if there was a bank robbery and all the detectives, policemen, they came to the crime scene, and all they saw was that the vault was open and the money is missing. And somebody just came in and said, the bank manager did it. Do you think those detectives are just going to be like, okay, wonderful, case closed, and walk off? No, they're going to first investigate. They're going to find out, what do we know right now? What are the facts? Right. And then based on that, they allow their investigation to unfold. So we need to find out, what are the facts? What do we know right now? Okay. Do you all agree that you exist as individuals? Do you know that? Meaning, if you put, I exist as Shweta. I'm pretty certain about that. And you exist as your own name. You're pretty certain about that, right? So you, the individual, exist. You're aware of that, correct? Agreed? This is something we know right now? Okay. This individual has to interact with the world outside, or gains its experiences with a world outside. Do you agree with that? Yeah, okay. So there's a world that we interact with outside. We're going to now use some technical terms for this. I, the individual, we're going to call, any guesses? It starts with a J. Jiva, okay. And this world we interact with, we're going to call it Jagat. Okay, so there's Jiva and then there's Jagat. Okay. Now, we know that we go on interacting with this Jagat to get experiences, correct? The experiences that we get are either, there's only two kinds of experiences that you're ever going to get. Either joy or sorrow, or somewhere in between, correct? Okay, so these are the kind of experiences that we get. Now, we also know we usually chase experiences that give us joy, and we run away from experiences that give us sorrow, right? You want to hear the biggest joke of life? No? I won't tell it then. I'm kidding, I'll tell it anyways. Okay, the biggest joke of life is that joy that we go on seeking in the world, that joy is always running away from us. And the sorrow that we go on running away from is always running after us. You know, like your Amazon packages. You order it and it's there, ready for you. Joy and sorrow, it's the same way. So we know very clearly that yes, I derive my experiences from this world. I also know I don't really have any control over the experiences that I have, correct? We can't decide. See, we all had a plan. This morning we were going to go hiking, correct? We were going to go walk on a trail. But it rained. So what could we do about it? Right. We thought we would derive some great joy from walking out on that trail, but we couldn't do it because it rained. So we know the things that we decide for ourselves, the experiences that we want to get, we don't necessarily control them, correct? Gurudev really didn't like eggplant, bangan. He absolutely didn't like it. And he used to always say that somehow or the other, anytime he went for bhiksha, there would always be bangan. There would always be eggplant. And it would be so crazy that even if he went, to a new place, those ammas and aunties would be like, Gurudev, we made this bangan, and actually bangan doesn't even grow here. It's not even a seasonal vegetable, but we flew it in from, this other place just so you can eat it, Gurudev. And Gurudev would feel like, my God, I went across the world to avoid bangan, and here it is in front of me. And Gurudev was diabetic. And so, anytime there's bhiksha, there's always, sweets. And so all these sweets would be set up in front of him. So Gurudev would feel, as long as, if I make it through this bangan, at least I get to eat sweets. And everybody knew he was diabetic too. So the moment he'd be done eating, the moment his hand would go to those sweets, someone or the other would take all those sweets away from him. And so this is what it is. Our joys that we're chasing after, somehow those joys are always slipping out of our grip. And the sorrows that we're trying to avoid, somehow they're chasing us. We know that the way that this world functions, right? We have to be fully aware then that I don't control it, correct? We can conclude this much. I don't control what's going to happen in this world as far as my experiences are concerned, correct? And yet, every single one of us gets whatever experience we need based on our karmas. This tells us that there has to be some intelligent, some conscious principle which is as though governing this entire world, right? Second thing is that when you were born, were you born with your own individual like cylinder of oxygen? No, you were born into this world, correct? And you breathe the oxygen that's here. You weren't born with your own like set of clothes either, correct? So we also know that we certainly didn't create the experiences or the world that we are living in, correct? We were born and we were thrown into this world which was already there. So we didn't create this world. We also don't have any control over this world, correct? There has to be some creator then, something which created this world, and some governing principle which is allowing or controlling what happens when. Right, so much we can agree on. Okay. It is on this logic that we can establish then the presence of what's missing. We covered Jiva, we covered Jagat, and Ishwar. There has to be some Ishwar, some governing principle, some creator. Okay, so 3 things we've established. Now the question is, are these things related or are they independent of one another? Is there some relation between these 3 things or are they independent from one another? How many of you think they're related? How many of you think they're independent? How many of you have to hear that question again? Okay. Jiva, Jagat, Ishwar. The individual, the world that we live in, and the creator or Bhagwan. How many of you feel that these 3 things are somehow related? Okay, better. How many of you feel that these 3 things are not related? Okay. I'm going to take just a few more minutes, okay? Vedanta shows us that in fact these 3 things are not only related, they are fundamentally one and the same. This is Vedanta's intervention. So what we know about this investigation we're doing, what we know right now is there is Jiva, Jagat, and Ishwar. Vedanta comes in and tells us that yes, they are all related, but they're actually related in a very, very fundamental way. What is that way? It is said, understand, in the beginning, before there was even any Jagat, before there was even any world, understand there was Paramatma. Paramatma. Okay? Paramatma. Paramatma you can interchange with Brahman if you want. There was Paramatma. And then that Paramatma with its Maya Shakti, with its creative power. Who do we call the Lord of Maya? Mayapati, the wielder of Maya. Who do we say is the wielder of Maya? Ishwar, right? Ishwar, Bhagwan. So now that Paramatma, when it wields its Maya, that Paramatma or Brahman gets the name Ishwar, right? That Ishwar then creates Jagat, this world. That Ishwar becomes, in fact, this Jagat, this world that we live in. So that one Paramatma we now know is Ishwar, is expressing as Ishwar. How? With its creative power, Maya. That one Paramatma then became this entire Jagat. And that one Paramatma then entered its own creation as Jiva, as the experiencer. So Vedanta is pointing out that understand, in fact, it is one and the same reality, one and the same truth, which is expressing as Jiva, Jagat, and Ishwar. Okay, so I have an example for this, but we're going to see it tomorrow. I told you this inquiry is twofold, so we've covered almost the first half of it, okay? We'll see the second half tomorrow. Someone had told me Brahman is like Taco Bell. You know, in Taco Bell, everything is made up of like literally the same ingredients, just different manifestations of the same ingredients. So think of Brahman like Taco Bell. Okay, anyways, so tomorrow we're going to see the second half of this inquiry, and we're going to see how it then relates to this topic of worship and Ishwar that we've been focusing on so far. Okay. Sound good? Are you guys having fun?
Yes.
Okay. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.